This week we review WWF Saturday Night's main event from May 1989. Hello everyone and welcome to the debut edition of the AX2 podcast. I am your host David Anderson and I am joined here sitting about 3 feet away from me from the man that is the other half of the two in the AX2 podcast. It's my 15-year-old son, Owen Anderson. Owen, what is happening?
Nothing much. Just very excited to do this show with you. I've never really done a show with you. Have I ever had you on my own show or?
No, you've constantly big-leagued me, and you've done about 400 different shows, and I have yet to do a run-in or a guest spot.
I've actually done 2. To make that accurate, I've done 2, so get it right.
All right. Well, as you can see, I actually can't see because it's a podcast. As you can hear, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. But yes, we are the Anderson men. And so if you're wondering, what does AX2 stand for? No, it's not a fancy sports car. No, it's not some sort of military-grade assault rifle machine gun. No, it's not some sort of classification from the FBI. AX2 is an abbreviation of Anderson times 2. And obviously this podcast is here with 2 of the Anderson men. Well, and I guess technically we're the only 2 Anderson men of this family.
All right.
A man of few words, ladies and gentlemen. But yes, we are the Andersons times 2, so the AX2 podcast. And we thank you very much for listening to our very first show. Again, you can check us out on social media. We are all over the place. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all at AX2Pod. And if you're listening to this, you probably found us initially either on iTunes or Podbean. And certainly we thank you for downloading the show. And as we continue to grow and continue to do more shows, we will be getting this podcast out on all of the different podcast platforms, whether it's on Stitcher or Spotify, all these different podcast feeds. So if there is a particular podcast application or feed that you like to get all of your podcasts in, give us a shout. Hit us up on social media and let us know where you get your podcast. And we will certainly do our best to get our little podcast out there so that it is the most convenient way for you to download the show. So I'm sure at this point you're thinking, David, what possessed you to want to do a podcast with your son? And for me, that was a pretty easy question to answer. Owen is a fine young man. Like I said, he's 15 years old. He is my only son, and he loves professional wrestling just about as much. Well, let's get real. He enjoys professional wrestling more than I do. And so what better way to continue to grow that love of professional wrestling than to do a podcast? And the great thing about having Owen on the podcast is Owen loves classic pro wrestling just like I do. And yes, Owen is more of a fan of the current product than I am. And so anytime that we talk about things that are of a current nature, the current world of professional wrestling, that's where Owen's going to be the expert. Because full disclosure, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to the current product. So that's where Owen comes in because he is the product knowledge master of the two of us when it comes to the current product. But he definitely gives me a run for my money when it comes to the classic stuff. So, Owen, what made you decide to want to start watching pro wrestling and fall so deeply into love with it as you have?
Well, it's because of you, honestly. I was probably 4 or 5, and I think you were watching Monday Night Raw, and I just came over, sat down, and that's just kind of where it all started. You know, John Cena. I've always been big into John Cena. Then I got a little older, kind of got away from the current stuff and got started more on the just other stuff. Then came back, but instead of liking the new stuff, I like the old stuff. You know, the Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior. That stuff's the cool stuff. So, but I watch SmackDown most of the time. Raw's too long, but SmackDown I will watch most of the time.
So speaking of Raw, and that's a good segue. into what we're going to talk about first this week. So Owen and I did have the opportunity this week. So as we record, today is Friday, April 26th, excuse me. And we are recording this podcast, and we had the opportunity to check out Monday Night Raw live. This past Monday was in our home city of Des Moines, Iowa. And Owen, tell everyone how your experience in going to Monday Night Raw was.
Monday Night Raw was pretty cool because I haven't been. So the last time I went to a WWE show was, I would say, 2017. I went to a house show with my dad and my sister. A lot of fun, but 2018 I think Raw came, but we just decided not to go. But this year we decided to go, and it was a lot of fun. I love watching on TV, but I also love watching live shows. It's always just, you're there with the crowd. The crowd's going wild. It's just it's fun to be at a crowd than just watching it on TV.
And speaking of being fun there live and sitting in the crowd, tell everybody where we were sitting and how much fun was that?
We were sitting in the second row. Now, that's pretty crazy. We've sat in the front row a few times, but second row is pretty cool. It was loud. It was awesome.
Yep, and certainly want to thank a couple of very nice individuals whom Owen and I have struck up a friendship with, and were able to secure second row seats to Monday Night Raw for us. So again, a big thank you to our benefactor who was able to provide those tickets for us. And it was my first time attending Monday Night Raw in several years. To be perfectly honest with you, I can't even remember the last time I went to Monday Night Raw. So for me, again, full disclosure, don't watch much of the current product. For me, the first 2 hours were great, and the third hour really kind of fell off a cliff. So without getting into a match-by-match recap, Owen, give me a high-level overview of how you thought the show. What were your favorite parts and maybe not so favorite parts?
I think my favorite parts was probably when AJ Styles came out, because he's my favorite WWE superstar right now. I'd have to say it was awesome when Seth Rollins came out, because I love just scream and burn it down, even though my dad over here does not understand it. And honestly, it doesn't make any sense, but it's just fun to yell out. That was cool. It was cool when Triple H came out. I didn't expect him to come. I thought it was cool when Cesaro came out. I'm a big fan of Cesaro. I booed the crap out of Courtney Graves. Yeah.
What about Baron Corbin?
Oh, yeah, Baron Corbin is garbage. My favorite moment when we were there, when you screamed out, "Hey, you're late for your shift at Applebee's." I couldn't stop. Everybody in the whole stadium was laughing. I thought that was amazing.
That's right. I got jokes, y'all. I got jokes for days, and no, it was fun. It's always fun when you get to sit close, because obviously watching on TV is fun, but when you get the chance to go live and to sit that close and really take in everything that's happening, like I said, it was a good time. So for me, my favorite parts were, again, I thought it was cool to see Triple H. Doesn't make a whole lot of appearances, it seems like, nowadays, so it was cool to get to see the game again. A big fan of The Miz, so it was cool to see The Miz back on Raw, and I also am a big fan of AJ Styles, and so getting to see him wrestle twice in one night is never a bad thing. So all in all, it was a very good time, and certainly we had a lot of fun going to Monday Night Raw, and certainly any time that WWE is in your area, if you have the chance to go check them out, they're still the biggest game in town, and certainly they do a great job with their live show presentation. But Owen, when we decided that we were going to do this podcast and the timing of the podcast, it hit me because this week we went to Raw in Des Moines at the Wells Fargo Arena, and right across the street from the Wells Fargo Arena is, I still call it the Veterans Memorial Auditorium. Now, I know the sign on the building says the Veterans Memorial Community Choice Credit Union Convention Center. Say that 3 times fast.
A lot of words.
A lot of words, but to me, it will always be the Veterans Memorial Auditorium. And it's actually still on the front of the building because they got it landmarked, so they actually can't change it. But across the street from Wells Fargo Arena is the Veterans Memorial Auditorium. And here in Des Moines, that was the main arena, if you will, for the Des Moines market up until 2005 when the new arena was built. And I was looking at the calendar, and the week that Owen and I went to Monday Night Raw here in Des Moines was the 30-year anniversary. So it was actually 30 years ago, as of April 25th, that the WWF, back then, was in town to tape an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event. And that's going to be the main event of what we talk about this week on the podcast. We're going to do a recap of the Saturday Night's Main Event that aired on May 27th, 1989. So 30 years ago, this TV taping occurred in Des Moines. So, Owen, in 1989, you would have been negative 15 years old.
Wow.
That would have made me 9 years old.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy.
Yep.
I got no words for that. No words.
So, well, you better have some words because this is a podcast. So start finding some words. But again, 30 years ago, and it's crazy as time goes by. So I thought, as we were getting ready to launch the podcast, it just made sense to recap the show because for me, it was my first television taping for the World Wrestling Federation, and the Saturday Night's Main Event show is one of my all-time favorites, and Owen, I know it's certainly one of yours as well.
Yep, one of my favorite episodes of Saturday Night's Main Event. I've probably seen it about 1,000 times. It's one of my favorite episodes. There's so many good episodes of Saturday Night's Main Event, but the one we're about to talk about is probably my favorite and probably the best that they ever taped.
Yeah, you'll get no argument from me on that. So let's go ahead and let's dive in and let's talk about Saturday Night's Main Event from way back. Again, the air date on this is May 27th, 1989. This was taped on April 25th, 1989 in Des Moines, Iowa at the aforementioned Veterans Memorial Auditorium. Now, back then, this was part of what we like to call a dual taping. So not only did they tape this episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, but they also taped 3 or 4 weeks of WWF Wrestling Challenge, which was one of the syndicated shows that was actually considered the B show. So back then, Superstars of Wrestling was considered the A show, and Wrestling Challenge was the B show. But as a kid, you didn't know what the difference between an A show and a B show was because pretty much all the stars were on every show, and it was just a cool thing to get to go see television taped. So when we try to look back at the landscape of where everything was back in April of 1989, so this is actually the first major event following WrestleMania 5. So WrestleMania 5 that year took place on April 2nd, and Hulk Hogan regained the World Wrestling Federation Championship. He defeated, of course, the Macho Man Randy Savage, who had held the title for the previous year from WrestleMania 4. He won that in the single elimination tournament and became the undisputed World Wrestling Federation champion. Owen, what do you remember about going back and watching some of that 1988, 1989 stuff with the Mega Powers?
I thought it was really cool. I've always loved the Mega Powers. They're probably one of my favorite tag teams in the World Wrestling Federation. I thought 88 was cool because the movie No Holds Barred, that's the year it came out, which I've always loved. I loved WrestleMania 4. It's not my favorite WrestleMania, but the main event was cool between Macho Man Randy Savage versus Ted DiBiase. I thought it was a very good match. And in 89, I knew it was going to happen with the whole slap to the face that Macho Man gave to Hulk Hogan on the main event episode. I thought, it's going to happen because every tag team breaks up, but I thought it was cool.
Awesome. So let's go ahead. Let's dive right in and let's talk about what happened on Saturday Night's Main Event. So again, we'll do a full recap of the show, and you'll have the the advantage, if you will, of with me being there live. I've got some things in my notes of some things that happened during the television taping. So I'll give you some of my perspective and feedback of things that I remember 30 years ago. Wow, still crazy saying that. But the show opens with a promo. Hulk Hogan, who's inside the steel cage, and really he's standing behind one of the sections of the cage when somebody's holding it. But of course, he's cutting a promo. He's hyping up his big WWF Championship title defense on tonight's show. And I'm pretty sure, Owen, that if I played this promo right now, you could recite the entire thing from start to finish. I'm not going to ask you to do that, but just give everybody a little taste. Give everybody a few lines from the promo.
You got it. Tonight on Saturday Night's Main Event, you Big Boss Man and the Slickster are going to have your day in court, man. You dudes been passed the sentence all over in the WWF with your own friend of justice, but now I'm the new WWF champion, and inside this steel cage, I'm the judge, the jury, the executioner, brother. I'm going to throw the book at you, man. The train, the prayers, and the vitamins are going up against the handcuffs and the nightstick.
He literally did that verbatim, ad-libbed, off the cuff, no script, no nothing. And he got it all right. So when he's saying that he's seen the show 643 times, he's not lying. But very nice job. So we go from the Hulk Hogan promo into the iconic Saturday Night's Main Event opening video package with that music. And once the package rolls, we go to Vince McMahon, who welcomes us to Corn Country, the Veterans Memorial Auditorium in Des Moines, Iowa. And again, this is airing on Memorial Day weekend. And Jesse Ventura gets a crack in about this is also soybean country. And that's true, but we have a lot more corn here than we do soybeans, Jesse. And he's telling McMahon to look at all the soybean products out there. McMahon goes into his hard sell, running down the card for the evening, telling us that there are 3 World Wrestling Federation title matches. Again, Hulk Hogan versus the Big Boss Man inside a steel cage for the WWF Championship. Demolition versus the Brainbusters for the Tag Team Championship. And finally, Ravishing Rick Rude will defend his newly won Intercontinental Championship against Hacksaw Jim Duggan. So right off the bat, Owen, what do you think about this opening with Vince McMahon and Jesse the Body Ventura?
I think it's pretty cool. I always love Vince McMahon always kind of telling you what's going to happen because, he's the voice of the WWF. I mean, a lot of people don't, you watch nowadays, he's too old to be the commentator or anybody, but for so many years he was the voice of the WWF. So I think it's pretty cool, and I love Jesse Ventura. He's hilarious. So I thought it was pretty cool.
Awesome. So we then go to a video package from WrestleMania 5 showing how Bobby the Brain Heenan, who was Ravishing Rick Rude's manager, helped Rude capture the Intercontinental Championship from the Ultimate Warrior. As the Warrior was attempting to suplex Rude back into the ring from the apron, Heenan grabs the leg of the Warrior outside of the view of the referee, which allowed Rude to cover the Warrior for the 3 count and become the new Intercontinental Champion. So backstage, we have an interview with Mean Gene Okerlund. He has Bobby Heenan and the Intercontinental Champion Ravishing Rick Rude with him. Mean Gene immediately calls out Heenan's shenanigans by cheating to help Rude defeat the Warrior. Heenan quickly dismisses Okerlund by saying he didn't break rule number 1. When Okerlund asks what rule number 1 is, Heenan instructs Ravishing Rick Rude to tell Gene what rule number 1 is, to which Rude responds, "Just win, baby. Just win." Mean Gene is beside himself with anger and questions whether or not Rick Rude's title is tarnished by Bobby Heenan's outside interference. Bobby shows us why he was the king of the one-liners, and then he says the belt shines almost as good as Gene's Chrome Dome and tells Gene to move along. The focus of the conversation switches to tonight's match against Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Heenan calls Okerlund a cue ball, saying Hacksaw is a dreamer and will never win the Intercontinental title belt, and tells Rude to remind us what happens to dreamers. And Rick Rude gets in the line, they get a rude awakening. So Ravishing Rick Rude, one of the best wrestlers of the era, good in the ring, good on the mic, said literally a total of 10 words during that entire interview segment.
10 words?
10 words.
Oh, man, I couldn't do that. 10 words? Wow.
10
he
words.
is like one-liner king.
Yep. So he let Heenan do all the talking for him. So after Gene sends it back up to Vince and to Jesse.
I wanted to point out, so there was actually in real life, wasn't it Ravishing Rude didn't actually really like Bobby? Not the person, but he didn't like the character with Rick Rude.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So there is some speculation out there that Rick Rude wasn't always happy about having Bobby Heenan manage him because Rude was worried that Heenan was going to get too much of his heat and that there was going to be too much emphasis put on Bobby instead of on Rick.
Okay, I just wanted to point that out.
Yep. So. Nope. Very good observation. So again, as Mean Gene sends it back up to Vince and to Jesse, Heenan and Rick Rude make their way down to the ring for the match. So we're 4 minutes into the show, and McMahon finally acknowledges that Duggan is now the newly crowned king of the WWF. As Rude makes his way into the ring, Ventura proclaims that Rude is his favorite champion of the 3 current title holders because Rude is the Jesse the Body Award winner from the Slammy Awards from a few years prior. So after that, we go backstage again to Mean Gene, who is standing by with the newly crowned King Hacksaw Jim Duggan. And after his recent victory over Haku, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, Hacksaw is wearing Haku's crown that is clearly too small as it shifts all around on his head while he's wearing it. Hacksaw dedicates tonight's match to all those proud Americans who gave their lives to keep the flag flying over the US of A. Hacksaw is grateful to them and says everyone else should be also. Hacksaw then says that great belt should not be worn over fancy pants like Rick Rude wears. Hacksaw is proud to be red, white, and blue, but Rude seems to be, quote, a little pink to me, quote, if you know what I mean. Mean Gene then asks Hacksaw what his plan is for how to contend with Bobby Heenan at ringside after seeing what Heenan did for ravishing Rick Rude at WrestleMania 5. Hacksaw's plan, he says, is to keep one eye on Heenan and one eye on Old Glory as he marches out of the shot. Hacksaw's plan is unintentionally funny as this is something Duggan could legitimately do, with him being cross-eyed and all.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, he really was cross-eyed. Like you can tell that he's like, "Hello, I'm Hacksaw Jim Duggan." Ho!
Yep. So we come back and we see Heenan and Rude in the ring waiting for the entrance of the new king of the WWF, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. So Duggan has new theme music, which is some generic royalty music that Harley Race and Haku had previously used, and that theme is best associated now with Jerry the King Lawler. So Duggan is being carried to the ring on a throne by 4 jobbers, just like his predecessor Haku was. The announcers hype up that this being Memorial Day weekend, and there are several shots of people in the crowd waving small American flags while cheering for Hacksaw. McMahon makes sure to point out that the kingdom is not on the line tonight, only Rude's Intercontinental titles up for grabs. Ventura gets a plug-in for his Navy SEAL team buddies with the Memorial Day reference. Hacksaw proceeds to enter the ring and begins prancing around like a king, much to the dismay of Jesse Ventura, and Hacksaw gets the crowd going with a loud USA chant. So before we get into the match, let's take a minute here and let me drop some knowledge here. So again, this show was taped on Tuesday, April 25th in Des Moines. So back then, the WWF television tapings, they would tape 3 to 4 weeks worth of television for their syndicated shows. Again, for Superstars of Wrestling and Wrestling Challenge. This event was a combined Wrestling Challenge Saturday Night's Main Event taping. Before this match was taped on Tuesday, there was a segment done for the live crowd in Des Moines where King Haku was wrestling an enhancement talent, and after the match, Haku refused to stop beating on his opponent. This prompted Hacksaw Jim Duggan to run down to ringside and hit Haku with a 2x4. After the next match of the taping, Howard Finkel then announced to the crowd that due to Haku's breaking of the rules, Hacksaw Jim Duggan was now the new king of the WWF. Next, staffers were then passing out miniature American flags to the folks around ringside and were instructed to wave them for Hacksaw during his match with Rude. Now keep in mind, this was 1989 and I was about a month shy of turning 9 years old when I attended this event. As soon as Finkel made the announcement, I remember being excited like every other kid there. But then I immediately questioned how Duggan was the new king when he hadn't beat Haku in a match for the crown. There was no internet back then, no smartphones, no Twitter that I could immediately search to try and find out why this was happening. What did end up happening was the next night in Omaha at the Superstars of Wrestling taping, WWF shot the match of Duggan versus Haku with Hacksaw winning and becoming king of the WWF. That same taping also featured the coronation of King Duggan, even though in reality he was made king on Tuesday night in Des Moines.
Really?
Yes, really.
Wow. Oh, yeah, you've told me that before. I just finally hit me. I'm really tired.
Yeah, so it was interesting because the Monday night they were in New York City at Madison Square Garden for a live event. Tuesday night was the Des Moines Wrestling Challenge Saturday Night Main Event taping. And then Wednesday was the Superstars taping in Omaha. So it was interesting because of the taping schedule. They essentially had to tape things out of order. So again, they had to come up with this angle to make Duggan the king in front of the crowd in Des Moines. So they did the thing with Haku. They made him the king. We go into this match for Saturday night's main event. And then the next night in Omaha at the Superstars taping is actually when they had the match between Duggan and Haku, where Duggan won the crown, and then they did the coronation that same taping.
Wow, that's crazy. I got a question. Were you confused? Like, why is he the king? Like,
no, because when you're 8 or 9 years old, you believe everything that they give to you. And again, Howard Finkel was the ring announcer, and he announced that Hacksaw Jim Duggan was the new king of the WWF. And again, I just said that it's like, well, he didn't have a match, he didn't beat him, but again, when they tell you that, hey, this guy's the new king, you just go along with it.
Yeah, I would believe it. I just was like, wow, I'd be like, wait, what? Like, he's been showing up on TV just, but then all of a sudden he's like the new king or something. That I'd be a little confused.
Yeah, but again, it was a fun time, and so they had to work around the scheduling of the tapings to make it all work. And again, if you weren't in Des Moines or in Omaha, I guess the next night, you were none the wise. But anyway, let's get back to the show. So the match starts off at a fast pace, Hacksaw getting the early advantage. Rude did a great job of selling for Hacksaw. Took a clothesline over the top rope, a suplex back in the ring. There's a fun spot early on where Hacksaw hits Rude with a clothesline. Rude pops up. Hacksaw hits him with a second clothesline. Rude pops up. Duggan hits Rude with a third clothesline. Rude pops up, clearly groggy, shaking his head, selling the impact of the clothesline. And before Hacksaw can hit Rude with a fourth clothesline, Rude falls face first onto the canvas, which gets a hearty chuckle out of McMahon, and the crowd is into everything Hacksaw is doing. Heenan is beside himself at ringside before Rude takes control with his signature forearm shots. As Rude is doing his hip swivel motion towards the crowd, Ventura exclaims that it's impossible for Rude to lose the title as it's airbrushed on the front of his tights. As a kid, I remember thinking how cool it was that Rude had that done for the tights he wore at WrestleMania 5, and here on Saturday night's main event, Hacksaw, and it was also here on Saturday night's main event. Hacksaw then hit Rude with an atomic drop. Rude sold it as if he had just been castrated, which was awesome. Hacksaw then hit Rude with a great-looking pile driver for a near fall. When Rude was able to get his foot on the rope, this then prompted the former King Haku to come down to ringside and try to steal the crown back. Haku's presence distracted Duggan, which then called for additional referees to make their way down to ringside to escort Haku back to the dressing room as we go into our first commercial break. So we're about halfway through the match. What are your thoughts on the first half of the match?
Pretty good so far. You can tell Hacksaw's obviously going to win. And the thing is, back in the day, and not always, but most of the time, the baby faces would always win. Like, even, like, any TV taping, anything. Now, there has been some times where it's like, whoa, like, the main event episode when Hulk Hogan got beat by Andre the Giant with the fake referee thing, and then Andre surrendered the tag team championship to Ted DiBiase. And it's like that, but most of the time, baby faces would win.
Very astute point. So we come back from a commercial break. We see Hacksaw. He's walking around the apron wearing the crown. Hacksaw places the crown back on the ring post and gets back in the ring. Rude cuts him off and takes advantage of the match. Rude hits a nice standing dropkick on Duggan. Rude works over Duggan, really slowing the pace of the match down from where they started. Rude hits Duggan with a fist drop from the top rope and then crawls over to the far side and made kissing noises into the camera. True heel, thick and thin. Rude attempted to ram Hacksaw's head into the turnbuckle, caused Duggan to Duggan up, a.k.a. hulking up. Duggan then made his comeback with a series of left and right punches. He hit Rude with a big back body drop to send Rude up into the lights. It was a great-looking spot. Hacksaw set up for his three-point stance, clothesline. He hits Rude with it, and it sends Rude through the ropes to the outside. Despite Bobby Heenan attempting to help Rude get back into the ring, the Intercontinental Champion could not make it back inside the ropes before the count of 10, and the match was awarded to King Hacksaw Jim Duggan via countout victory in 7 minutes and 15 seconds. Duggan is beaming from ear to ear, the fans are going crazy, and Jesse Ventura begins to laugh hysterically. When McMahon asks what Jesse's laughing at, Ventura reminds the viewer that you can't win the title on a countout. Ventura insults Duggan's intelligence, saying Duggan probably doesn't even realize that he's not the new Intercontinental Champion. Duggan poses with Old Glory on each corner as we go backstage to Mean Gene. So Owen, we've got King Hacksaw Jim Duggan, defeating Intercontinental Champion Ravishing Rick Rude via countout, which means Rude keeps the belt. I thought it was a fun opener to the show.
I think so too. It's just a good little fun match to get the fans on their feet and just getting the crowd going.
Absolutely. So again, we go backstage. This time, Mean Gene is standing by with Jim the Anvil Neidhart. And Gene asks Jim the Anvil Neidhart why this match now with the Macho Man Randy Savage. And Anvil proceeds to scream that he hates the Macho Man. He hates the way Savage treated Miss Elizabeth. He hates the way Savage acted when he wore the championship belt. And the Anvil proclaims that if Macho wants another shot at Hogan's title, Savage has to go through the Anvil. Gene proceeds to ask Neidhart what his thoughts are on the Macho Man's new manager, Sensational Sherry. Anvil yells, "Scary Sherry," along with his trademark laugh. And we kick it back up to Vince and Jesse. We lost Jim the Anvil Neidhart last year, passed away. Always one of my favorite characters, again, best known for being part of the Hart Foundation tag team with Bret the Hitman Hart and the original incarnation with Jimmy Hart, and then just the tag team with Bret and Jim, and then the final run in the WWF with Bret, Jim, Owen, Davey, and Pillman as my favorite incarnation of the Hart Foundation from 1997. But before we get to the match, Owen, do you have any fun memories of Jim the Anvil Neidhart?
Not really, but he was always that funny gimmick that you always just laugh at. It's just how crazy he was. But he was, and he wasn't like a great technical, but my thing is why would you watch wrestling to see who's the best technical wrestler? You watch to be entertained. And I think Jim was he was great.
I agree. It's a tragedy that we lost him. So next up, we've got Jesse Ventura is backstage interviewing the Macho Man Randy Savage along with Sensational Sherry. Macho's wearing the white robe with the turquoise sequin pattern with a matching headband and those famous white wraparound sunglasses. Definitely a vintage look for Macho Man here in 1989. Jesse says he isn't going to ask Savage about WrestleMania 5 because he knows Macho's on his way back to becoming the champion again. Got a classic Macho Man promo. He calls out Hulk Hogan and Miss Elizabeth while putting very little to no emphasis on his opponent this evening in the Anvil. Sherry proceeds to cut a promo on Miss Elizabeth. Savage instructs Sherry to make her way down the aisle. First, they're going to get past Jim Neidhart, then on to Hulk Hogan. As Savage and Sherry exit the shot, Ventura instructs McMahon to stay quiet until he returns to the broadcast booth. What are your thoughts on this promo here from the Macho Man and Sensational Sherry?
One of my favorite promos, but I think it was funny how you said where it was like they didn't even focus on Jim the Anvil Neidhart. They were mostly just like, I'm coming after you, Hogan. And the funny thing is, Macho Man didn't get the title until like 92, right? 1992. He won it at WrestleMania 8, but wasn't even supposed to happen. But that'll be for another episode, another time.
Yep, so Savage and Sherry make their way down the aisle. On two separate occasions, they have trash thrown at them. Come on, Des Moines, we're better than that. As McMahon is recapping the fact that Savage wants to once again be the World Wrestling Federation champion, Ventura comes back on the headset and scolds McMahon for not following his direction to keep quiet. This takes us into our second commercial break, which originally was a spot for the Mountain Dew Slam of the Night, which is not included in the WWE Network version. But since I had this show recorded as a kid on tape and watched it no less than 683 times, I can tell you that the superstar profile during the Mountain Dew Slam of the Night was that Big John Studd, who had recently returned to the WWF. You remember these Mountain Dew Slam of the Night spots that Sean Mooney would voice over?
Oh, yeah. They were awesome. I love Sean Mooney. He's the best.
Absolutely. So we come back from commercial, and we see that Macho Man is taking off his robe and sunglasses. When the robe comes off, you can see that Savage's right elbow is still heavily bandaged from his recent bout of staph infection. The infection actually occurred before WrestleMania 5, and the prevailing wisdom was that Savage had no business being in the ring due to the seriousness of the injury. Hulk Hogan, in an interview that was published 4 years ago, recounted the event as a serious injury and noted that Randy never complained once about the pain, the issues, or anything related to his elbow. Savage was not missing out on that WrestleMania 5 main event with Hogan and just taped it up and went out and did his job. And FYI, in 2019, 30 years later, there is no chance that a WWE superstar with a staph infection would be allowed to compete, WrestleMania or not.
Wimps.
So the match starts out with a feeling out process. Crowd is heavily booing Macho Man and everything he's doing. Sherry interferes early on by grabbing the leg of the Anvil, which allows Savage to take advantage. Anvil takes over and locks Macho Man in a bear hug that Savage sold like Anvil was killing him. Anvil goes down near the ropes, and Sherry gets 2 separate opportunities to choke Neidhart while Savage has the ref distracted. Throughout the match, you can audibly hear Sherry screaming instructions to Savage like any good manager would. Anvil hit a nice slingshot from the outside, followed up by a series of shoulder tackles for a 2 count. Anvil hits Savage with a standing dropkick that sends Macho Man to the outside. Anvil then takes this opportunity to get in the face of Sherry, and as Neidhart follows Sherry around ringside, Savage attempts to nail the Anvil from behind, but Neidhart hits Macho with a dropkick on the outside. Back in the ring, the Anvil continues with the power moves, including a power slam, and eventually ties Savage up in the ropes. As the referee backs Neidhart off of Savage, Sherry helps Savage escape the ropes when Anvil charges. Savage moves, which sends Neidhart crashing to the outside. Macho Man then climbs to the top rope and nails Anvil with a double axe handle on Neidhart, which causes Anvil to nail the guardrail. Savage then rolls Anvil back in the ring and finishes Neidhart off with a patented flying elbow smash for the 3 count at 5 minutes and 54 seconds. Post-match, McMahon puts over the fact that Macho Man is looking for another shot at Hulk Hogan for the title, and Vince throws it to Jesse, who is standing by with an interview. So Owen, what'd you think about this Macho Man Jim the Anvil match?
That was actually pretty good. Really quick. Like 5 minutes. Usually matches go for about 10 minutes. But 5 minutes, pretty short.
And it's like you said when you were commenting about the Macho Man interview, the fact that he didn't really even put any emphasis on Jim the Anvil Neidhart, that basically the entire pre-match promo was talking about Hulk Hogan and Miss Elizabeth. Kind of gave you the insight of, well, okay, is Anvil really going to be much of an opponent for Macho Man tonight, because they're not even really making any focus on him during the interview.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, it's true, because they really didn't focus on them. They're really, like, Macho Man wants the title. But, yeah, I agree with that.
So backstage, Jesse's with the Big Boss Man and Slick. Slick proceeds to cut a Slickster promo, running down Hogan, saying he's scared, and the Boss Man's going to take his title. Boss Man explains step by step, using prison metaphors, exactly what his plans are and what he's going to do to the champ. In watching this back, I just noticed that Big Boss Man's upper right side of his forehead is raw from the several blade jobs he's done in working all over the country with Hogan in this match. At one point, I had this same exact match, move for move, on 5 different Coliseum videos, and including this match on TV. Slick then makes the comment there's going to be a big surprise, and it's showtime!
Showtime! Yeah, I'm sure, because back then, they would, go from place to place. It would be the same moves, and the thing is, nobody would know, because it's in different states and different cities. Like, because, the internet, you would be like, oh, that's all the same. But back then, there was no internet, so it was just, oh, it must be different. But you got the smart guy over here, he knows, yeah, it's the same.
So magically, less than 3 minutes after the end of the previous match, we come back from the backstage interview to see the big blue steel cage is fully set up and ready to go. Spoiler alert, this cage match was the last match of the taping, and I can promise you it took way longer than 3 minutes to assemble. So, a little side note, during the assembly of the steel cage is the moment that I was 100% certain that the business of professional wrestling was not completely on the up and up. Again, I was almost 9 years old, and being such a big WWF fan, I had to listen to people constantly telling me that wrestling was fake. And while I didn't believe that it was 100% real, I had my suspicions that it might not be as real as I would have hoped. I came to this conclusion as I was sitting in the balcony in my seat watching the ring crew bring out the pieces of the cage to be assembled. To do this, it required the big red curtain you see in the shots of the arena to be parted wide open to get the equipment through. As I was sitting in my seat taking in the entire process, I saw something that led me to the conclusion I had hoped wasn't true. At one point, the curtain opens, and in plain sight, I see Bret the Hitman Hart standing in the backstage area, drinking a cup of coffee and having a conversation with none other than the Slickster. As soon as my eyes spotted them, I was locked on them, as the curtain stayed open for what seemed to be an eternity. In reality, it was probably 20 or 30 seconds. Nevertheless, it was long enough for me to have the burden of proof that pro wrestling wasn't 100% real after all. What's funny about all this is that while I've known the business as a work for close to 30 years, I still get offended when people call it fake and proceed to correct them to use the phrase choreographed, with my explanation being that if it was fake, no one would ever get legitimately hurt.
That's true, and I've told that to kids at my school. They'll be like, "Oh, it's fake." I'm like, "Well, here," and this is exactly what I'll do. I go, "I got a question for you. Then why are wrestlers getting hurt all the time? Why are they getting concussions? Why are they have broken bones? Because if it was fake like acting, that wouldn't happen." And they'll be like, "Well, it's acting." Yeah, it is, but they get hurt. Actors don't get hurt. They have stunt devils. So, just saying.
So, as the Big Boss Man makes his way to the cage, McMahon's questioning what surprise the Doctor of Style has in store for Hulk Hogan. You can hear the Big Boss Man say, "I will be the new champion. I am the new champion," as he makes his way to the ring. Slick enters the cage and grabs the microphone from Howard Finkel and proceeds to remind the crowd that he has a surprise. Owen, go over this promo for us. What does the Slickster say when he gets in the ring?
I told you I had a surprise. My surprise is 6 feet 11 inches tall. My surprise is 343 pounds. My surprise is Zeus!
Keep in mind, this was the weekend before the movie No Holds Barred was set to debut in movie theaters all across the country, so the WWF was in 100% shill mode for this movie, pulling out all the stops. Now, I'm sure we could do an entire podcast surrounding No Holds Barred and all the promotional work on WWF TV done to get the people excited about this movie. That gives me an idea. Anyway, Zeus makes his way towards the cage dressed in full Zeus character regalia with the giant shoulder pads and the Z shaved onto the side of his head. The WWF did a fantastic job in casting Tiny Lister as the Zeus character because he looked 100% believable. Zeus comes down to the cage. He slams the cage door shut. He then proceeds to stand on the ring stairs, arms crossed, facing the entranceway as the cameraman shoots Zeus from down low, looking up to make him look even larger and more impressive. Zeus yells, "Move me," as we go to a clip from the motion picture No Holds Barred of Zeus destroying a man half his size during the Battle of the Tough Guys movie. He's beating his opponents either unconsciousness or death. Either way, Zeus was a bad mother.
Yeah, man, like, what's funny is, if you guys have ever seen the Dark Knight movie at the end when they're like, "Hey, give this to me, I'll throw it." He's a big dude, and like I've seen in pictures, he's actually like muscular. Like, he's not just it's probably just steroids. I mean, he probably did, but he's a big dude.
So we come back from the clip of the movie to the screen graphic of the cage match between Hulk Hogan and the Big Boss Man. Rick Derringer's Real American can be heard blasting through the PA system, and the Veterans Memorial Auditorium has come unglued. And I was one of those kids that was coming unglued. This is the man we all came to see, the real star of No Holds Barred, acclaimed Vince McMahon, as the World Wrestling Federation champion Hulk Hogan makes his way down the aisle to the cage. This entrance is one of the best in WWF history, as this entrance clip from Des Moines would be used on several Hulk Hogan video packages throughout the years to come. As Hogan approaches Zeus, you can see Hogan do the blowing of his face, exhaling heavily, really selling the fact that Zeus is standing in front of him. It's great visuals from both Hogan and Zeus. Zeus again yells, "Move me," to Hogan, which causes Hogan to start hulking up in the aisle. Zeus kicks Hogan, knocking him back, and as Hogan charges Zeus nails Hogan 3 times with shots to the trapezius area, which crumples Hogan in a heap on the arena floor. Crowd does not like this one bit, and they are loudly booing Zeus. Zeus rips off the shoulder pad apparatus and begins to hit himself across his own chest and yell as he makes his way back up the aisle towards the dressing room and takes us to our third commercial break. So, Owen, what do you remember about this entrance of Hulk Hogan coming down the aisle to confront Zeus?
The first time I watched it, I was like, that's, man, like, that must have hurt. But, when you're not even 10 years old, like you said, not even 10 years old, you're kind of going to believe, like, oh, man, that must have hurt. Because, like, any time I watch wrestling, like, when they get kicked or whatever, I always think, like, oh, that must have hurt. But then what I've kind of seen on videos of people are like, no, it doesn't. So, that's just my thoughts.
So we come back from commercial and we see the Big Boss Man is in the cage still waiting for Hogan, who's down and out on the floor. Referee Earl Hebner is standing over Hogan near the door. So there's a cool spot coming up where Boss Man kicks the cage door open, which made Hebner have to duck and dive out of the way. Boss Man exits the cage, grabs Hogan and throws him into the cage and yells, "Ring the bell, punk!" to get the match started. Bossman rips the shirt off Hogan and begins choking him with it. Hogan makes a comeback and nails Bossman with a big boot to the delight of the crowd. Hogan tries to escape the cage and Bossman cuts him off. Hogan did a great job in selling the Bossman's offense, taking slams and really bumping for the big Bossman to give him credibility as a challenger. Bossman went for the door and Slick stopped Bossman and told him to continue punishing the Hulkster, which even caused Jesse to question that move. Bossman hits Hogan with a modified Bossman slam and went to climb out of the cage. Bossman climbed up and over the cage and was scaling down the outside of the wall of the steel structure. I was convinced at 8 years old that Hogan was going to lose the championship right in front of my very eyes. As Bossman got halfway down the outside of the cage, Hogan grabs the big Bossman through the bars to stop his progress. Hogan begins choking the Bossman, pulling him back up and choked him using the top of the steel cage. This series of events would lead to a moment that absolutely blew my mind as a kid. Hogan grabbed the Bossman in a suplex position and proceeded to suplex the big Bossman off the top of the steel cage. McMahon and Ventura did an excellent job calling this, saying they had never seen anything like that done before. Whoever came up with this spot, I tip my proverbial cap to you. Hogan and Bossman are laying in the ring, both selling the impact that the superplex had on both of them. Crowd begins chanting for the Hulkster. Slick is on the outside, pounding on the canvas, trying to get the Bossman up. Referee Earl Hebner opens the cage door and comes into the cage. He looks at both men, holds both of their arms up, and they both drop lifelessly to the mat once he releases them. Hebner really isn't sure what to do next, so he starts counting both men out. Heel Ventura has a tremendous line here. "This is such a shame for the Bossman. You can't win the championship on a double countout." McMahon is absolutely repulsed at this statement. As Hebner gets to the count of 8, Hogan does his best Undertaker impression by sitting up. Hogan begins to crawl to the door to escape, which miraculously awakens the Bossman and prompts him to stop Hogan from getting out. After the big Bossman drug Hogan back to the middle of the cage, Slick tossed a chain over the top of the cage to the Bossman. Bossman begins to choke Hogan out with the metal chain. He attempts to ram Hogan into the cage. It's blocked, and they both ram each other into the cage at the same time. As both men fall to the canvas, their left legs bend and extend like a well-choreographed synchronized swimming routine. As the announcers are concerned that we may have another double knockout, both men are quick to try and recover. Hogan takes over, ramming Bossman's head into the turnbuckle repeatedly, and then grabs the same steel chain that Bossman had choked him with earlier. Hogan plays to the crowd and wraps the chain around his hand, ready to use it as a weapon on the Bossman. As Hogan is playing this up to the crowd, you can see Big Bossman cut himself on the forehead in anticipation of being hit with the chain. Hogan then nails the Bossman twice in the head with the fist wrapped in steel. Hogan rams Bossman into the cage, going from side to side across the ring 3 times. Hogan then hits the big Bossman with the leg drop of doom and signals it's time to exit the cage. Hogan begins to climb out of the cage, which prompts Slick to ram the referee into the side of the cage, knocking him out. Slick jumps into the cage and grabs Hogan's leg to stop him from climbing. As Hogan kicks him off, Bossman begins climbing the cage on the opposite side. Hogan comes over and nails the Bossman, which drops him right across the top rope in a most uncomfortable position. Hogan then grabs the handcuffs from the Slickster and handcuffs the Bossman to the top rope. Hogan gives him a slap for good measure, and it's time to go. Hogan begins climbing the cage on the opposite side of the ring. As Hogan is climbing, the Bossman walks down the side of the ring, still attached to the ring rope, secured by the handcuff, but he's near the door, and if he can get free from the handcuff, he can get out of the cage first and win. Slick tries to unlock the handcuffs, but not in time as Hogan scales the cage and drops down to the arena floor first to a thunderous ovation and wins the steel cage match in 10 minutes, successfully defending the World Wrestling Federation Championship. But wait, that's not all. After Hogan gets his hand raised by Hebner, Hogan rams the Bossman into the side of the cage on the floor and gets back into the cage where Slick is all alone. Slick begins jumping up and down, begging for mercy from Hogan. Hulkster grabs the nightstick and begins twirling it, threatening to dish out some punishment. Finally, Slick wants to give Hogan 5. Hogan obliges and then proceeds to grab Slick and run him up into the side of the cage to the delight of everyone, including me, who was in attendance. And you all know what happens next. Hogan must pose. Hogan poses us into the 4th commercial break. So, a very iconic World Wrestling Federation Championship match, steel cage match. Again, the superplex off the top of the cage. Again, my 8, almost 9-year-old mind was completely blown. What do you remember about this match, and where does it rank for you all time?
-5 stars. No, I'm just kidding. I would give it, I'd say like 10 stars. But great match. And Hogan is so good at selling. He's always been just a great seller. Like he can make the opponent look good. One of my favorite matches. I've probably seen it, like you said, probably about 1,000 times. But still one of my favorites to this day.
So what did you think about that superplex spot when Hogan superplexes Boss Man off the top of the cage?
That's pretty cool. I'm surprised nobody got hurt. Like, I mean, no words. It's wow. It's just crazy how you can do that. Because Hogan really didn't jump off the ropes. He's a big guy. Back then, big guys did like 5 moves, and that was kind of it.
Yeah, it's one of those things to me as a wrestling fan, as someone who's been a fan for 30 plus years. I think for me, the reason that's so special to me is, number one, Hulk Hogan, all-time favorite wrestler. But number two, the fact that happened in Des Moines, I was there, and it's one of those things that you don't forget. And again, to me, that's the magic of professional wrestling, is when you see something that it captivates you, it blows your mind. You have, and I don't care what age you are, when you have that moment of you suspend that disbelief and you fully immerse yourself in what's going on and you get caught up in the match. And again, this match happened 30 years ago, and it still impresses me every time I watch it, because again, Hogan was a big guy, Boss Man was a big guy, and that's a big spot. And I know obviously the style of wrestling today is certainly much different than it was from 30 years ago. But to me, this is it's a classic, old school, good versus evil, good guy versus bad guy cage match. I know that there's a lot of people out there who hated the big blue cage. They preferred the more traditional metal, like chain link fence. I was always a WWF guy, so for me, the big blue cage is number one.
Yeah, I've always loved the blue cage. I mean, in WCW, they had the fence cage, which was okay, but the big blue cage is always, it's the classic cage that, man, this happened. Like, so many cool matches have happened in that cage.
Absolutely. So we come back from commercial and we see the graphic for the tag team championship match between the reigning tag team champions Demolition and the challengers this evening, the Brainbusters. Jesse Ventura is backstage with the challengers. So Jesse asked Bobby to address the commentators who said he would never manage a champion. Bobby says seeing is believing. He goes on to say that it's a big night for the whole Heenan family because when one wins, they all win. Tully and Arn each get a short one-liner in about how they'll be the new champions. Jesse wraps it up by asking if Heenan has any worries about tonight's match. Bobby says that he has one concern, and that's the Busters contracting lead poisoning because of all that cheap paint they put on their ugly faces. Other than that, he doesn't have a worry in the world.
Yeah, I've always loved that line of they have to put all that cheap paint on their ugly faces. I've always thought that was hilarious. Bobby Heenan was the best.
Absolutely. King of the one-liners. So the Brainbusters make their way out to the ring with no entrance music. And it's crazy to think that in 1989, Vince still had main talent not coming to the ring with entrance music. Lots of loud chants of Weasel, Weasel, as Vince throws it back to Mean Gene. Mean Gene is standing by with Demolition. Gene asks for a comment. Axe gets a great line in calling the Busters the Egg Beaters. And Smash says that they're not going to beat them. They're going to demolish them. They're Demolition. They're the champs. Short and sweet from Demolition.
I agree. I've always loved Axe and Smash. They were always man, you don't want to mess with these two dudes. They're going to kill you.
So Demolition make their way out to a nice ovation. Commentary team emphasizing that this is the third championship match of the evening. I always loved how the camera would focus on Demolition as they removed their masks with the colorful face paint and growling. 30 seconds into this match, Heenan is already up on the apron trying to interfere on behalf of his team. Demolition starts out fast with a power double team move. Fun spot where Arn does a big vertical suplex on Smash. Anderson turns his back on Smash to celebrate with Tully. Smash stands up and no-sells the move. It was a great exchange of stiff but safe shots from Blanchard on Axe, completely no-selling and Axe using his size and power advantage over Tully. After Blanchard is knocked to the floor, Smash press slams him from the floor back inside the ring. Camera shows Heenan clearly frustrated with his team's performance. Axe then clotheslines Blanchard out of the ring right on top of Bobby Heenan. The crowd loved that. I actually remember that spot. A groggy Heenan jumps up on the apron like he wants to go after Demolition and has to be restrained by the Brain Busters. The Busters try and get Heenan to go back to the locker room as we head to the 5th commercial break of the evening. As we come back from break, we see the Busters back in the ring, and the camera pans to show a groggy Bobby Heenan slowly making his way back towards the ringside area. Second half of this match spotlights the Brainbusters using great double-team quick tags on Smash. The subtleties done in this match are awesome. There's one spot where Blanchard tags in Arn, and Tully moves in front of Smash to prevent him from tagging his partner in. Another classic heel spot is where Smash, he's close to tagging Axe, and Tully sneaks down and goes over and yanks Axe off off the apron, preventing Demolition from making the tag. Axe getting pulled off the apron leads to a brawl with all 4 men inside the ring. Full pandemonium is broken loose. Referee Joey Morella has lost complete control, which prompts Axe to pick him up and toss him into the corner, which gives us an automatic disqualification at 9 minutes and 15 seconds. Demolition continue to beat down the Brainbusters and toss them out of the ring. Jesse Ventura accuses Demolition of getting themselves intentionally disqualified, which McMahon quickly disputes, saying Demolition was clearly frustrated with the antics of Heenan's men. Finkel announces the Busters as the winner by disqualification, which prompts Demolition to jump out of the ring and brawl up the aisle with the Busters all the way back to the dressing room, taking us to the 5th commercial break. You don't see great tag team wrestling like this anymore, which is a shame. I haven't watched this match in depth in probably 10 years, and I loved it. It was great psychology out of both teams.
Yeah, they both did a great job with selling, and just the thing is with Demolition, they're a great power team. Like they can get the crowd on their feet, because nowadays it's are they a good wrestler? Like, are they good technical? Back in the day it was like, are you strong? Like, can you beat guys up? Because that's what gets the crowd on their feet. But nowadays it's very different nowadays.
Absolutely. So we're back from commercial with a Jesse Ventura interview backstage with the victorious Macho Man Randy Savage along with Sensational Sherry. Savage cuts a promo about being the number 1 contender. Hogan can no longer hide from him, and when Savage is done with him, he won't be fit to be a movie star. Savage puts over his new manager, Sensational Sherry, and instructs her to cut a promo on Hogan. She asks Hulk Hogan what is he going to do when the madness runs wild on you. The segment ends with all 3 saying Savage's "Oh yeah" catchphrase.
Best catchphrase ever.
So we're back at ringside. We see the Doctor-style Slick in the ring with Boris Zukov, who's attempting to sing the Russian national anthem, but he gets cut off by the entrance music of the recently returning Superfly Jimmy Snuka. Snuka comes out to the ring and does his Polynesian dance that impacted Howard Finkel to the point he bailed out of the ring while doing the intro for the Superfly. A match graphic for this contest plays us out to the 6th commercial break. We come back from commercial to a quick match. Zukov tries to hit Snuka in the head, which is clearly a mistake. Snuka hits a double axe handle and body slam to set up the patented Superfly splash off the top rope. Crowd begins to roar as Snuka adjusts his knee pads and makes his way up to the top rope. Snuka climbs the ropes, flashes the I love you symbol, and flies through the air with a sea of flashbulbs as his backdrop onto Big Boris. This image would be the inspiration for a Superfly Jimmy Snuka WWF poster that was sold in the fall of 1989. I remember seeing this poster in the merchandise catalog and instantly being able to place this from the Des Moines show I attended. Snuka gets the 1-2-3 in just over a minute. Crazy how much Snuka was over after being off WWF TV for 4 years. Instant replays show Snuka splash from another angle, and it takes us to our 7th commercial break.
Yeah, I've seen that match, obviously, because I've seen the whole show, but it's not it's a pretty quick match, but never been a big fan of Jimmy Snuka. I've just never been like a huge fan of him. Like, at WrestleMania 1, I thought it was cool he was there, but I just, never someone that I'm going to buy shirts, I'm going to buy posters, I'm going to pretty much dedicate my life of him.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, Superfly's biggest run was really pre-Hogan. So Superfly was big in the WWF up until about 83 into 84 when Hogan hit the scene. And when Vince put the title on Hogan and went national with Hogan, Snuka really kind of faded into the background and faded into obscurity. So it doesn't surprise me that you have that opinion. And I'll be honest, I wasn't a big Jimmy Superfly Snuka fan either. I mean, he was a decent character, but again, by the time he came back in 1989, he was I'm pretty sure late 30s, early 40s, and clearly he had been off for a while and certainly was not going to come back and come back into the main events at that point.
Right, yeah, and you got to remember, you get to an age where you can't do that anymore on your body. Because, I mean, there's lots of wrestlers that they just have so many back problems, so many neck problems. It's because of that. And I think nowadays, guys aren't having to retire younger because they're not on the road as much as they used to be. Because back in the day, you worked 300 days a year. And, there's 365 days a year. So you would be off 65 days. So that's probably why a lot of guys have had to retire younger. And nowadays it's a little different. But, I'm not there, so I don't really know how it works.
Sure. No, that's a good point. We come back from break with a wide shot of the crowd, and Vince voiceover throws it to a clip of No Holds Barred. So this is the diner scene from the movie where Rip single-handedly takes down two robbers with an assortment of dessert items and restaurant furniture. As a kid, I just thought it was so cool that All My Rowdy Friends Are Coming Over Tonight was playing during this. After the clip, Vince sends us backstage to Mean Gene, who's standing by with the Hulkster. So before we get to the interview with the Hulkster, this diner scene from No Holds Barred, is this one of your favorites from the movie?
Oh, yeah. I would say that's one of the best scenes where the two robbers come in and then he pretty much beats the crap out of them. It's a good scene.
Were you impressed with the Hulkster's pie throwing ability to be able to take down robbers just throwing different desserts at them?
Yeah, I was a little surprised. I was like, how's that possible? I mean, I could see the chair, that can knock someone out, but getting a pie thrown at you, I don't know if that would really hurt. Might stun you, but not really hurt you.
I don't know. He's got 24-inch pythons.
It's true.
So we come back, and Mean Gene is congratulating the Hulkster on the win, and they segue the conversation to Zeus. Hogan cuts a promo on Zeus, challenging him to come down to the squared circle. Hogan can't wait for all the Hulkamaniacs to come out and see his new movie, No Holds Barred. Just a quick promo from the champion that takes us to our 8th and final commercial break of the night. So what were your thoughts on the Hulkster's promo?
I thought it was cool. It was kind of quick, but pretty cool interview. I love it when he would wear the Hulk Rules bandana. It annoys me so much that he did a couple times, but most of the time it was like he'd wear the Hulk Rules bandana in interviews, but then he comes out and he's not wearing it. It's like, just wear both. Like, you look cool with both. But I think most of those were pre-tapes.
Absolutely. So our final segment is a stand-up with Vince and Jesse. McMahon asks Ventura if he's enjoyed his time here in Des Moines, to which Jesse responds with a sarcastic, "Sure." Vince thanks us for watching and invites us to join them in July for a special summertime edition of Saturday Night's Main Event, which prompts Jesse to get irate, saying he thought he was through with McMahon for the summer as Vince signs off. We roll credits with the video footage of Hogan posing in the cage with the tremendous Saturday Night's Main Event theme song playing, and we fade to black. So, Owen, what are your thoughts overall of this Saturday Night's Main Event from May of 1989?
Tremendous show. It's fun to kind of go back and this, because for me, I never got to live through that. So for me, I've always thought it's super cool to hear stuff from my dad, like, oh, this happened, because a lot of stuff that he talked about, you guys would have never saw, because when Bret Hart and Slickster were talking, you didn't see that because they shut the cameras off and were working on getting the cage up. You guys never got to see that. I love hearing those kind of stories of behind the scenes.
So I've got another one that I've shared with you before that I know you always enjoy, so I'll share it with the crowd here. So one of those things that you did see happen during the show was during the Wrestling Challenge portion, taping portion, the Red Rooster, Terry Taylor himself, had a match against an enhancement talent, and Rooster is doing his entrance, and he's strutting around the ring, and he takes off that red sequined Red Rooster jacket, and he kind of nonchalantly flings it out of the ring. And I don't know if he did this on purpose or if he just misjudged his throwing ability, but he actually tossed this jacket into the front row. And this lady grabs the jacket because it falls in her lap. And you kind of see Terry Taylor like, oh, okay, well, he's got to do the match. So he starts wrestling the match. Well, from where I'm sitting in the balcony, I can see this lady sitting in the front row. And right away, you see one of the staff or security people come over, and they're like, okay, you can see them motioning to give the jacket back. And she's not going to give this jacket back because he threw it into the crowd and she grabbed it. to the point where, I mean, this match that the Red Rooster had with this enhancement guy was, maybe 4 minutes tops. But they spent this entire match, and again, the camera doesn't shoot this, but they spent the entire match basically trying to get his jacket back from the Red Rooster. And eventually, I don't know if they had to bribe her or if they just said, look, either you give us the jacket or you're out of here. But she eventually did give up the jacket, and they took it backstage. But again, to your point, one of those stories that if you weren't there live, you wouldn't have known it. And just one of those cool things that was part of an overall great experience in attending this taping.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite stories. But, I mean, honestly, if I caught it, I would have ran. Like, it's mine now. Bye. But I probably would have gotten caught because I'm not very fast.
Well, that is going to do it for our recap of Saturday night's main event from May of 1989 here in Des Moines, Iowa. Certainly, Owen and I hope that you enjoyed this week's episode. And we are going to continue the look back. What we'll try to do is every week we'll pick a certain event. Maybe it's a TV show, maybe it's a pay-per-view, and we'll go back from all different eras. And we won't necessarily just focus on the WWF. We may go back and watch some WCW, maybe some old school NWA. Who knows? But Owen and I are pretty big WWF fans, so the majority of our content will be of the WWF. But again, if there's something that you would like us to review, hit us up on social media. Again, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at AX2Pod. And next week, Owen and I are going to be reviewing the very first WWF In Your House pay-per-view from May of 1995. And next week on the podcast, I will reveal why I chose this show. Owen, I know that when I told you that we were going to review the first In Your House pay-per-view, you were on board with it, but you had to admit that you haven't really watched that show, so you're not as in tune with that show as you were with this one. But what are your initial thoughts about covering a show from 1995?
I think it would be pretty cool because you have, in 95, you have like Bret Hart, Razor Ramon, Diesel, Shawn Michaels. You have, or what they called back then, the new generation of the WWF. You have those guys, and I know a lot about that, but I gotta admit, I have never seen this, but I can't wait to watch it and take some good notes and give you guys a good show.
Absolutely, and I'm a big fan of that new generation era, as Owen spoke about. So for me, I'm very excited to go back and watch the very first pay-per-view of the In Your House series, again from May of 1995. So if you have a chance this week, go back and watch it, and then that way you are up to speed when Owen and I go through our recap next week. Again, we thank you very much for downloading this debut edition of the AX2 podcast. And if you want to follow us on our personal social media, you can follow Owen at Owen R. Anderson, Andersen. And if you're so inclined and would like to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me at David C. Anderson, Andersen. So again, Owen and I try to keep the branding strong. Twitter and Instagram, Owen's at Owen R. Anderson. I'm at David C. Anderson, and that's going to do it for this week. Owen, any final words?
Don't really have much, but you guys have a great rest of your week.
All right, and again, thank you so much for checking out the debut edition of the AX2 podcast. We appreciate you listening, and we hope you'll join us next time.